Town Council, and it's February 2nd at 12:07. And the meeting includes Maria Naughton, Hillary Armand, Rita Bettino, and Kimberly Norton, and me. And our guest is Kathleen Corbett. And if it's all right, we'll start with, oh, hey, welcome, Christina. Christina Ross is also with us. So we have almost everybody. We just short Mark Jimsky and I.
And here comes Mark.
All right.
Hi, Mark.
100% participation.
Thank you for the reminder, Tom. I'm knee deep in work, but
all right. Well, some of us have to make a living and pay income taxes so we can have all these wonderful benefits in our society.
That's for
Thank
sure.
you. Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder.
A simple agenda today. I just want to touch base. I understand this process is sort of prolonged, but it's not easy to make laws. And so I just wanted to check in on a couple of issues. One, let's start with the Utilities Commission, because that's why Kathleen Corbett is logging in. And the issue that has been sort of percolating is that I had felt that the original premise for asking for a Utilities Commission was it may or may not still be there, depending on how we resolve the cell tower question that's before the town council right now. Number two, we got input from, or I got input from Ross Tartell of Wilton, saying that they tried to do a Utilities Commission and it sort of went defunct for lack of interest. But so there are a lot of sort of new things that had crossed the radar. However, I'm getting a lot of feedback in support of the Utilities Commission, and I just sort of thought that I would clarify some of my earlier notes and say that I could support it and will be part of the process with one condition, and I want that run that to you guys. I think it's okay for it to have a broad mandate, and we would trust the commission to, use their the scope of their authority wisely and judiciously. But I want, if we're going to do this, my condition of supporting it would be that we bend over backwards as we draft this to make sure that we're not duplicating things that are working at the, in the town right now. Especially the example would be Tiger Man and the way he services residents' complaints about installing gas lines and whatever all the things are, that he just is the most responsive, incredibly effective advocate for townspeople. I'd hate to basically create something duplicative that could actually make his job worse. So, but if you guys are in support of that, then I think we could roll with this. But that's just my opinion. I thought others could certainly chime in as to whether you think we should go back to square one and ask the question, should we revive this or not? And please, anybody that wants to speak would have the floor.
Yeah, Tom, in our last meeting, I sort of had some reservations and it stemmed from the fact that, there's discretionary and non-discretionary utilities, right? Solar, is non-discretionary, is discretionary. And, the natural gas and the electricity is very regulated. And, I think the town does a good job to the extent that they can, communicating with those major utilities. When it comes to things like telecommunications and poles being put up and, solar, I'm 100% supportive of the town being involved in communicating properly with residents. I just struggle, as do you, Tom, with if it's very broad, is it just going to end up in the Wilton camp, which it just, flounders, if you will. Because when, I'm not sure how you could really effectively communicate about the electrical grid to residents. And, basically they complain when power goes out, but, what else can we do beyond that? I'm not sure. So that's why I sort of was, referring to the elephant in the room, which is this is being brought back up because of the way the towers are being handled and the lack of clarity and transparency around that. So basically, I'm sort of in Tom's camp.
I'd like to say that. Oh,
I hope
sorry.
that made sense. Sorry, Kim. I just hope that made sense.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. It does make sense. And I mean, I just want to say that I am in support of a utilities commission for a lot of reasons. I think that the telecommunications issue is not going to be solved for a while. I think Kevin's talking about other towers in addition to the one at West School. And I think that just providing a forum for residents to be able to, number one, get involved, serve on the commission, use the talent we have in New Canaan. There's a lot of people that have some really deep knowledge of telecommunications, not carrier-free solutions that would not cost the town anything. I know Rita mentioned something about, and people have talked about putting wires underground. There's so many things that could come up that I think it makes sense to shed light on all of it and make it an open, transparent process. So I'm 100% in support of it. In terms of the complaints about utilities, I would just maybe wonder if the Utilities Commission could be kept in the loop on kind of the tenor of the complaints, maybe with a report from Town Hall about how many people are experiencing issues with X, Y, and Z, just so that they were kind of in the loop. But I think they're going to be so busy, I don't think that they want to take complaints per se.
Well,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tom. Did you want to?
No, please.
So I'm kind of, I'm sort of agnostic about it. My issue is that I feel like it came up as a reaction to the way that the cell, again, as Mark said, to the reaction as to the way that the cell tower behind West School was sort of announced again to the public, and that this ordinance and reviving the Utilities Commission is almost a way to try to make our first selectman more transparent. I'm just going to put it out there. But you don't, or first of all, you're not going to make him be more transparent by creating a commission, right? If you want a more transparent first selectman, to be perfectly frank, you do that at the ballot box, not by drafting an ordinance to try and make that happen. And if this is supposed to be advisory to that first selectman, I think you need to have buy-in from that selectman. And I just don't know that we have it here. And, you know, if it's about cell towers, first of all, I don't think this commission will be formed in time or have its, you know, not act together. I hate to say it like that, but I don't know that it will affect the West School cell tower. I think we can all agree on that. And to the extent that it could only affect future cell towers to the extent that they're on town-owned property. If it's not on town-owned property, I'm not quite sure what a town commission, what input they could even have, because that would be between the private property owner and the siting commission and possibly planning and zoning. So I don't know what their jurisdiction would be with respect to that. With other utilities, I mean, I guess I feel like we're kind of creating justifications for it when the real issue is we want to make government more transparent and more accountable. And if that's the case, then can we just say it instead of kind of creating paper tigers that are like, you know, kind of trying to come up with reasons for it. But again, I mean, I'm agnostic. I want to hear, you know, it's fine to say, well, there's a lot of issues that can come up and sort of say these generalizations, but when you sit down to put pen to paper and write an ordinance for that, it's very hard. And I think that's kind of what we're struggling with as we sit down to write it, because there's all these things, you know, it's been very generalized. So that's what I'm struggling with.
Who was next? Was it Christina
Rita.
or Maria? Maria?
Yeah, so
Rita?
first,
Sorry.
okay, I'm not on mute.
Yeah.
First of all, I agree with Kim, your position. I support that position. I am in support of the Utilities Commission, but Hillary, I understand you make really good points, and I agree with you. I think it shouldn't be about this first selectman. It also shouldn't be about this person who's in charge. It shouldn't be about Tiger and Kevin, right? It should be about those roles. So I agree. And I think it is hard. I think writing any of these things is hard because you want to make sure they're in there for a reason. So that caution is I hear you and I agree with you. The reason I think there should be a utilities commission, when you talk about transparency, sometimes transparency doesn't happen, not because it's intentional, but because it's sort of a function of people are busy or people, they're trying to get things done. And I think, you sometimes have to force that transparency or create an avenue for that transparency. And I think this could be that, communicating to the public, gathering information, being, educating folks. So I think this could help with transparency, no matter who's in place. So that's one thing. You mentioned, Kim mentioned there are other cell towers. This isn't the only cell tower. There are more cell towers. And you're right. We don't really have jurisdiction if it's private land. However, I do think there's a concern wherever it is on the safety of cell towers. And I think this Utilities Commission can play a role in understanding what those risks really are and just, leaving it out there. And because I think that there are cell towers that are erected today that people might be concerned about. We should just understand if there are really any risks or if there are manageable risks, or maybe placate folks and let them realize that it's not as dangerous as they think. But we need to understand that because safety is not going to go away just because whether it's on a leased property, whether it's on town property or private property. So I think that's a concern when we're talking about cell towers. But beyond that, I do think there are other areas that we could be addressing. We mentioned burying the lines, or really just, to me, it's not just about burying the lines, but it's the cost that we incur year to year maintaining the lines, and it's the power outages that occur, and for the length of time. I mean, that's a big concern, and I think with some planning and some thought, like that is something I think we should be thinking about. Kathleen has mentioned in the past, the chargers, the car chargers, and like having kind of a plan for that. They're only going to increase, and so what are our thoughts on that? There should be kind of a broader, I think, approach to it, a strategic approach to it. And I think this panel could act as advisors to that. In terms of who they could report into or what their role could be as advisory role or not, they don't have to report. We could have them report into town council. We could.
I think under the charter, they have to report to the first selectman.
We can discuss that.
And if they don't have a budget, they can't report to us.
That's not true.
No,
That's not true.
I thought that was the case, that they have to have a budget to report to town council.
No.
Oh, I was given wrong information then.
So anyway, for those reasons, I think, for communication, for oversight, for education, and I think it was brought up at one point, there are all these different utilities. Do we have to have people experts in all those different utilities? I don't think that's necessary. I think the skill set you need, an engineer would be helpful, but I think the skill set that you need is really like, it could be a project manager, that the skills, someone who can gather information, analyze it, someone who could, process the information, communicate the information. There's so many skills that I think could be useful no matter what the utility. And just on the last point about complaints going into Tiger, I wonder about that because I dealt with Tiger when we were fixing our roads, and he really appeared to be inundated with people reaching out to him. Is that the most efficient way? Can we help him? Can this be a way to help with that and really understand what the public's need truly is? Could this body create surveys, or we can get into the details, but I think they can help understand and consolidate all of those complaints or all of the need that might be there and understand it better. So that's my 2 cents.
Maria,
okay.
I'm sorry if I missed Christina, whoever was next.
Oh.
For some reason, my screen, I'm not showing all the faces.
I think it was Christina, but
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to give some history. The Utilities Commission used to meet on an as-needed basis. So when an issue came up, they would just continue to meet, and then the issue would be settled and they would go dormant until the next cycle. And it included everything from gas line distributions to discussing underground wires or well, a plethora of things, including cell towers. And basically the committee was basically disbanded. And not that anybody was asked to resign, people started to leave because of the temperament against some of the commissioners at that time. To just clarify, the town council has both the ethics committee and the audit committee reporting to the town council, and neither one of them has a budget. With regards to the issues at hand, I think it isn't just cell towers. Just like Rita mentioned, we have the electric car charging stations that are going to be of concern. We have the sewers, the stormwater drainage and other things that they may touch upon. So it's not something that we're mandating that you meet every day or once a month unless there's a need for it. And the fact that we've had it for so many years, I moved to New Canaan in 91 and it had been in existence way before that, that there was no reason to terminate it. And I think that the termination led to the first selectman just taking the reins. And I agree with Rita that and Hillary that we need to provide a way for the public to be able to not just learn through a process, but also to be able to speak up about it and give us the information. We don't need a survey if they can come and tell us. And right now, the way that the meetings are structured with all groups is you can't discuss something unless it's on the agenda. And by the time it gets to the agenda, the goose is cooked and everything has been created, but without the input of the public. So I think this is essential to clarify, educate, and give people a voice in an understanding of the issues at hand. And those that are interested in the topic will follow it. And I just can't see ourselves without it. We need to implement and reinforce that transparency is of top concern and importance, and therefore we should reinstate it. And for any reason, if the first selectman does not appoint, the board of selectmen should appoint, or the town council should step in and appoint, because not appointing is not acceptable, in my opinion anyway. Thank you.
Maria.
I totally support the commission, and it's not, just to repeat some of the stuff that's been said, it's not really new. It's just kind of going back to making sure it's active. And I think, the difference is it's just a huge difference, not to impede the work of public works, but that's different. That's an employee versus this would be the public having input, knowing about things. So, I don't think it should be something that will interfere with what gets done, but I do think it's important to have. And then the other point about this, it did come up because of the West School cell tower, but, with the town at the same time thinking about 8-30G and maybe having a trust for buying properties, like we don't know that this won't come up again. So I think it's important to have it in place. And I think that was it, but I support it. I think we should definitely fire it up again.
Kathleen.
Well, thanks, everybody. Appreciate being here with you. Really appreciate the work that's being done here in terms of this discussion about Utilities Commission. Like a number of you, I was here when the Utilities Commission was actually very active, when Joanne Kennedy was finding opportunities to recommend solar options for residents and to tap into financial opportunities for individuals. There was a whole year-long program with the state of Connecticut. And, those are the kinds of things that perhaps many don't remember, but the Utilities Commission was a very active commission. And unfortunately, it did sort of stop back about 5 or 6 years ago. Tom Teslick was the chairman at the time. He moved to New York. Joanne Kennedy also stepped down, and what remained was and there was one other fellow I think who also moved out of town. Anyway, long story short, it is always incumbent upon whoever is first selectman. This is not about the current first selectman, but whoever's first selectman, to make sure that and the town parties, the DTC, the RTC, to encourage that people are considered for boards and commissions and so forth. And this sort of just died. It would have been able to be resurrected back then had we been more proactive about, getting new people, fresh voices, fresh eyes on the situation. We did not. So that's on everybody, but this is an opportunity, I think, not just because the cell phone or the cell tower issue is before us. It is, and I think it does remind us of the value of utility commission. But a lot of things have been sort of left on the back burner because we could be doing a better job if we were to reestablish the Utilities Commission. With respect to the ordinance itself, I shared with Tom. He asked me to provide some suggested language, and so I shared that with you, Tom. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at it. But I agree with some of the earlier comments about the Utilities Commission doesn't really need to be 6 members. In fact, 5 is sufficient. We have 2 of the 3 that are listed on the website are interested in continuing. One moved out of town 3 years ago, and we failed to actually update that, and he has to go through the process of actually resigning. So we'll help him get through that. I'm also very cognizant about this isn't about the people who are in their jobs now, the first selectman, the head of public works and so forth. This is sort of establishing really a relationship that is important to the town and our constituents, recognizing some of the things that, okay, for complaints, I agree, but you might want to look at if they shouldn't be the sole source of receiving the complaints, but they should be reviewing them. How many complaints did we get in a month or a quarter on Frontier or on Eversource or on Aquarium? That sort of information should be tracked. I hope it is. And a commission such as the Utility Commission should consider that. Should we be having a relationship with folks at PURA? You're going to be talking about the Affordable Housing Committee coming up shortly. Having a relationship at the state level is important, and whether it be with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, whether it's for PURA, having those relationships are very important. And then with respect to, it's not just about transparency, it's about making sure we have the resources that can do it. One person can't be the most intelligent person about all kinds of utilities. Having a team approach of 5 members, having all aspects of whether it's engineering, finance, distribution, supply chain, etc. These are all talents that I know that we have in town. And I think if brought together on a revised Utilities Commission, they can only be value added, and they can protect things like, excessive complaints that might come in over Tiger's transom. I know I'm always trying to support him because I get a lot of complaints about a lot of different things, and we're really there to help him, not to overstep what his responsibilities are, or Tucker's or anybody else. So it's really about working with management, not working against management. So hopefully the language I supplied can be shared with you through Tom, always open to other suggestions and so forth, but it was really meant to address all of the issues that all of you have raised here and in prior discussions about the Utilities Commission.
All right, so Hillary and Mark, they have the votes, so.
I mean, that's fine. I'm just, like I said, I'm agnostic about it. Like,
Yeah.
I think if you can find the right people who want to volunteer their time, because it could be, it could be a fair amount of time. It could be not, it just seemed, again, I'd want to see the language maybe again. And if it's changed at all, I just want to make sure the sort of, I assume we would take out maybe the point about receiving complaints, because I can't imagine asking someone to volunteer and like during a snowstorm or a bad thunderstorm, I'm imagining that like I would never put somebody up for that job to be like the clearinghouse for residents calling them with complaints about their lights being out.
Yeah,
Because
it was never, even though the language said that.
well, the language is, that's why I would like to see the updated language. Yeah.
I will just read to you that the commission shall have the right to review complaints,
Perfect.
just as I described, regarding utility services in New Canaan, and to receive information and reports from town officials on time and
Perfect.
date.
That's, yes,
That's
that gives me great comfort because I can't imagine, so like, I would run if somebody offered me that volunteer.
It's never been the way it happened. I mean, who doesn't get complaints all the time? You could be in the grocery store and somebody's giving you, right?
All the
So, but there was never any formal process of the Utilities Commission receiving complaints.
Okay.
It's old language.
Okay.
Well, I will share Kathleen's email that just came today, and everybody can take a look at it. And I would undertake to put all new language together with relying in part on that input. I think we kind of have to start from scratch, and the concept is that we would have a broad mandate, because we really can't, we don't have the information and the expertise to sit down separately for each utility and talk about the scope of.
No,
We have to rely, it just has to be broad and rely on the committee to use some discretion. I will, however, take a crack at clarifying this most recent conversation about making sure we don't get in the way of processes that work, Tiger being an example, and I'll get that out to people. I think we should try to move forward on this, because I think most people certainly on the committee and probably more broadly would think it, at least in concept, it's a good idea. So we'll try to make it happen. Let's shift over to the Affordable Housing Committee. So there's this one question I just need you guys to help resolve about our recent draft had 5 at-large members, and we got some input, and I can't stress strongly enough that Scott Hobbs and Dan Radman are so critical. Certainly in the case of Scott, we wouldn't have any affordable housing built in the last 15 years if it weren't for Scott. So I really want to defer to Scott, and I'm going to advocate if he says 3 at-large members will make a more efficient and effective committee. I'm not going to second guess that. So that is my position. Dan, of course, is important going forward, because it's critical that Affordable Housing Committee has healthy interactions and collaborations with planning and zoning, which has huge responsibility. Dan also suggested 3 members, but it's not up to me, and it's not up to Scott, and it's not up to Dan, it's up to you guys. So have at it. What do you think?
I was not supportive of it being that many people from the beginning. So I think 3 is enough. I mean, it's hard enough to find people willing to step up in this town. So I think, we have to be cognizant of that, and also stepping on making it harder for those that are already involved. So I think 3.
I was in support. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, so I'm in support of 3.
I'm in support of 5, because I think that having a more diverse committee would be a richer discussion for the town. I also think the only person on the committee that's of the appointed members is going to be a town council member who's elected. The other 3 are appointed from planning and zoning, housing, and board of finance. So I think that having 5, and hopefully people that represent different areas of the town, live in different zoning areas, different topographies, just brings a richer discussion to the whole situation. Although I definitely understand what Scott and Dan are saying, I don't see what the downside is to adding more members if they're willing to serve. Thanks.
Who else?
I would like to say, I'm sorry.
All right, Christina.
I would like to say that I don't think that 5 is an exorbitant amount of at-large members to have, but I'm willing to consider reducing it to 4. But I think 3 is still a little bit short. I don't know if we should have alternate members. That could also be a consideration, but if we're going to have 5, that is. So that's it. I think it's an important enough commission that it will require work, and the more people on the committee, the more you can divvy up the work.
I would say, I would support 5. I think it brings in the public, not just our current board members. And also, I don't think it'll bottleneck things. I think with an odd number, with 5, if they're taking votes on things, 4, I'd worry because you might have ties. But 5 would allow a greater discussion, and if they're voting, nothing should get held up. So I say get the public involved. And it's like any other board, but I do think there's a commitment, but I think there are a lot of people who want to be involved. So I don't think there'd be a shortage of finding people to become members.
Can I ask you, can you remind me how many board members or commission members will there be? It's
9.
If it's
No, no.
5, there are 4 from town bodies
4 from town bodies.
and 5 at large would be 9.
And you're saying Scott was recommending there to be 7 instead of 9.
7, right.
So initially, I feel like you, Hillary, from the last thing, I was kind of agnostic. Either way is fine with me. But I'm kind of persuaded by some of the arguments. Like Kim, you saying that it really being able to be representative of like different kind of corners of our community. And if you could get the people and if they're willing to do it, I don't really see a downside. I don't know if I buy the argument that it would bottleneck things personally. I think sorry, is that not, am I misrepresenting that?
Well, I didn't hear the word bottleneck. I don't care about the terminology, but I didn't hear that as really the issue. I think the issue with Dan and but particularly with Scott is he's not focusing on well, let me put it in the positive way. What he's focusing on is expertise. He wants the working group of the committee to have as many experts or people who can become experts as possible. And he says that the more people that you have on the committee, the less likely it is that'll happen, because his experience with the housing authority is that, people get on the committee and they do not become experts. They have political and social opinions to share about what's right and just in terms of fairness, social justice. But they don't necessarily have the time or the inclination or the background to roll up their sleeves and say, I can help you review an 830G application because I have certain insights that I've developed, blah, blah, blah. So
Right.
Scott's really focusing on experts. He thinks that they're far and few between, and that's his motivation. I don't think it was.
Yeah, I got it. No, I hear you. I
Yeah.
mean, do you think that could be addressed during like the interview process to make sure we're picking the right people? Because I think experts are really important, but I also don't see a downside in just making sure there are folks on there that are representing the public and not necessarily like the biggest or the best expert. I see a value in that.
Well, people talk about the ability to spread the work.
Yeah,
if we
and
have
that too.
7, if we have 7, you can spread the work more than if we had 5.
Yeah.
Well, I think Scott would say the fallacy is that he has every applicant to be on the housing authority. He asked them, do you have expertise? Can I have somebody who's looking for people with expertise? That
Right.
was perhaps his sole selection criteria.
Right.
And he was unable to get enough people that have expertise. So that's why he's saying that they don't grow on trees. And so there's a fallacy in saying, well, if we have few experts, well, if we have more people on the committee, they can share the work. Well, non-expert people can't really contribute to the work. They can have an opinion about policy, but the idea of how do we juggle some of the complexities of compliance with 830G, you're not going to get that. I'm just sharing his perspective. I I'm not trying to convince you to change your vote. I just wanted to be sure you understand the background.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just, so I hear you, and I actually, like I said, I was kind of going, after I read that, I thought maybe it is better to have less, but actually hearing some of the
Mhm.
points that people are making now, I feel like if you can be more representative, I would do that. So that I'm leaning that way.
Okay. Who else?
I think 3 is enough. And I think particularly since we would draw the chair from that group still, which I think is a great idea. And you know, or we could do 3 and 2 alternates, but I think I don't think 4 is a good idea, because then you do have the issue of the tie break, and how you would resolve that. Yeah, I mean, I do take Scott's opinion on it. I weigh that pretty heavily, and how he thinks this can be accomplished, only because he's been doing this for so long. And I do worry about the efficiency of it, because we are under kind of a time constraint, especially this first go round. And I do worry about, yeah, I worry about it not, you know, not being as focused on what needs to be accomplished, the sort of tasks that need to be accomplished. But again, I think I'm outvoted, so it's okay. 3, 5.
Yeah,
Christina?
I just wanted to say that one of the things that impresses me most about New Canaan is the level of intelligence and the willingness to share that information in a constructive way by the residents. And I think that when they have come up and spoken, we have all learned something we didn't know, whether it's a point of view or a point of fact, whatever it is. So I don't think that any task that a committee is tasked with would be overwhelming, that a person cannot be appointed to do something, including research and or making calls and finding out what other towns are doing. So I don't think that there's anything in the level of responsibility that will be given that it's unsurmountable to any one individual.
I agree with that. I agree there's a ton of talent, and I don't want to sell any of that short. I do think that there's a difference between people that getting up and speaking sometimes and the rubber hitting the road and agreeing to sit on a commission, because I've trying to find people to sit on commissions before, and I've been active in that, has been difficult for even the committees that we have that exist right now. So finding 5 people to tackle this issue that don't necessarily also have an agenda to stop affordable housing in New Canaan, or another one that will look at this too without wanting, you know, is hard. It might be a little difficult. And can they, I don't know. Can we find 5 people that will commit? I hope so. I mean, I can think of 2 off the top of my head, definitely.
I mean, I think it's up to the first selectman, and it's kind of like choosing a jury. And Hillary, I know you're an attorney. I don't know if you're a trial attorney, but when you go to choose a jury, you're looking for someone who's unbiased. So having that as a criteria, someone who is a hard worker, but I think also the other thing
The
that's
nice
really
thing about having a
important
jury is you're
is-
required to serve. That you get, like, we can't pull in residents and be like, 12 of you are going to get
Yeah.
picked.
Well, I was just trying to
Like-
use that as a broad analogy.
Yeah.
But the thing is, this is the first time we've had a commission like this. So I think having new energy, new ideas, creativity, and actually naivete might not be a bad thing, because
No,
we're
I-
trying to create a solution to something that we haven't been able to figure out yet. So one thing I just want to digress for a minute. I was listening to something on the radio about why our General Assembly only meets for 5 months out of the year. And that's because most of the people that served and represented their communities were farmers. And they had to harvest. So, I mean, the basis of, representation is to have people without expertise. You don't have to be an expert to serve on something. You just have to live in the town and pay taxes.
Yeah.
So while I understand Scott's point of view, I don't think we should be elitist about this and assume that the only people that can serve are experts.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Kim, I just think, for me, I struggle with what Hillary was talking about earlier, which is, people only speak when it really impacts their backyard. And this issue is yet no different than, or maybe it's a little different than the tower at West School, where you see a lot of West School families coming out. But the minute you move on, those voices go away. So I worry that trying to find 5 people that'll actually put in the time, because it is a lot of time. And this is not just once every now and then when, a piece of property is up and it's right next door to you, that's when you speak. This is like addressing a big topic. And you have to be open-minded. And I just am concerned that you're not going to find people that are open-minded. I really don't. And I think 5 people is a lot. And I think, I respect, as Hillary said, Scott's opinion more than anyone's at this point in time. So, but I'm happy to go with consensus.
Yeah. I mean, if you
Well,
guys feel strongly that we can find 5 people or more,
And we
And
don't
the-
select them, for the record.
yeah, if you think, and they have to be a mix of parties, and we have to, like, if you think that that's doable, or we start at 3, and if we get an overwhelming response of great people, then we could amend it. Or we start at 5, and if we don't, I don't know. I don't know what the best course of action is. I do see it as a big job.
Tom, can we move to a vote on this?
Sure.
Yep.
So
Anybody
I
want?
think Maria had a comment. Maria, did you have a comment?
I was just gonna say the language could say no fewer than 3 and no more than 5. I mean, I don't know if that's appropriate for a committee, but
And you wouldn't
Well-
have to amend it if you didn't get you could still run it, it could still run, but the ideal number would be 5. I would be okay with that.
right, you could still run it if you only had 3. So the language would be no fewer than 3 and no more than 5.
But not
So-
4. Just kidding.
But not 4,
So you'd be, so you
a
would be,
3 or
leaving-
5.
you'd be leaving it up to the Board of Selectmen to decide how many.
Mhm.
Well,
Well, I
you
think
could
the
say.
target would be
3,
5, but
3,
it could still run
target
at 3.
5. Right, 3, but target would be 5, an aspirational goal. But I mean, when it's 0.00025% of our population, 5 people out of 20,000 people. I don't think it's going to be that hard to find 5 people. I think that we got to be more bullish on this because it's a huge problem facing the town. We need to find a solution to it. We need new energy, creative ideas, and a lot of people to do the lifting.
Well, I guess my gut is, let's make a decision, 3 or
Yeah.
5. If it turns out to be a problem, we can always revisit it in the future.
Or
Uh,
leave, I was gonna say, leave it at 5 and we bring it to the town council and we can have a bigger discussion with the whole group.
That sounds scintillating.
Talk about analysis paralysis of a big group. I mean, you're making
Government
my
goes
point
slow.
for me, Maria. You're making my point. I like.
All right, then just leave it at 5 and we won't talk about it anymore.
All right. So do I have a motion to, well, right now that we've already agreed on the 5. So is there a motion to take it to 3 or no? All right, so we'll leave it at 5 for now. Another thing came up, John Goodwin, who, as you all know, for many years was the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Committee, just sent last night some suggestions, and several of them we'd already taken care of, but the one that he thought might be the most dicey, the language he's proposing is the town planning and zoning department shall provide support as needed to the committee including town planner attendance at meetings if so requested. The committee will have the ability to request funds for consulting and other support through the town's budgeting process. I would submit that the second sentence is obviously true. They're going to have to go through the budgeting process. So I don't think we need to say that. But my concern about the first sentence is, I'm not sure what happens, and I know Hillary will be sensitive to this, is that if you write things and you give examples of what you want, in this case, it's who you want support from, and you leave something off the list, the implication is that you weren't serious about those people that you left off the list.
Mhm.
I really don't feel comfortable creating the parameters for to whom the committee would look for support, for consultants, for lawyers, for access to the town planner. But whatever we do, they're going to have to get a budget for it. And my sense of the budget process is that it's a pretty good way to not only ask for the money, but if you have the money, whatever it is you asked for, you get to do, So if you want half a planner it's exclusively assigned to this committee, I'm just making that up, and you ask for, $53,000 in the budget for half a planner, you got it. If you don't ask for the budget authority, you don't have it anyway. So I'm not sure writing half a planner into here, just to take that as an example, really accomplishes anything. But I
Yeah.
thought I'd get your reaction to that.
I think leave it to the discretion of the committee to figure out what they might need.
Yeah,
But
I
give them
agree.
the discretion to ask for a budget and then let them figure out what they might need the funding for. Does that make sense?
yeah,
I think that the funding would go through planning and zoning, and I think that the planner is an essential member of the committee because not only can she make recommendations as to who the town has used in the past or who an expert might be, but also it keeps the direction and the information current, meaning that if asked by P and Z what's going on, she can speak of it as well. I don't see her or him as being a part-time. I think whenever the committee meets once a month, she or he should be there.
no, that was just an example to illustrate the point.
Okay.
More to the point, right now, the town planner, right now we don't have a town planner. We have a temporary interim town planner. But the town planner is a specific line item in the town budget. I don't remember who, Steve, maybe you remember whose budget that's in. Is it P and Z or I don't know, but it's in the budget. That specific salary, is in the budget. So, and it's used, I guess, pretty much exclusively by the Planning and Zoning Department and Planning and Zoning Commission. So if we say here that if we could, and I'm not sure we even can, but if we were to say here, we need half of the planner's time, then what does P and Z do? They already have budget authority for a full-time planner who's way overworked as it is. So I don't think that this discussion today is the place to start jockeying for who uses that resource. And that immediately will put us at odds with the Planning and Zoning Commission, who's saying, well, what are you doing? You should go through the budget authority. If you want the town planner to appear, go through the budget process and get us more people so that we can do our work. You see where
But that's a discussion for once this committee meets
right?
to discuss what the needs are. The planning and zoning director would only be there at the meetings. We're not asking or giving them additional work.
Oh, that's right. There is additional work, but I agree with you. You started out by saying this is a discussion to have by the committee, not by us.
Mhm.
I don't think we
Right.
can require it under the ordinance. I don't think it's fair to say
No,
they have to be here. I think that if the committee decides in their discretion, which I think would be a great exercise of discretion to require somebody from the planning office to be there, but they should ask for funding to pay that person to be like, I think it would be weird to require as a condition of their employment that they attend these meetings.
It's
That
kind of
we
like
might
an
get an
unfunded
important-
mandate.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If it's
They should, what if this committee thinks that that's necessary to have a dedicated employee who handles affordable housing stuff, and we think it's big enough, then they should probably go get funding to pay that person to handle that. That's my, but they should have the discretion to figure out what kind of funding they need to do whatever they need to do.
Oh, yeah, and
Yeah, I agree with you, Tom.
On
I
the-
don't think, yeah,
I was on the phone with, I ran this by Ira Bloom this morning and he said they inherently have the ability to ask for budget. So
Yeah.
I think we have to talk about that here.
yeah.
But yeah, so I think the committee, and it, just a additional quick gloss on that. When you begin the budget process, you say, okay, I want $75,000. And people will say, well, how are you going to use it? And so the committee really needs to be specific about, is it to build is our goal A30G projects, or is it, senior housing, or is it whatever? I think the budgeting process zeroes in on, what's your case? How do you want to spend this money? And does it make sense to the town? So
Yeah,
I don't think
I think that's right.
I feel very deferential to John Goodwin for all the incredible work he's done. But I don't want to get in the way of what the committee really needs to do.
Here's a question for you. In the composition of the committee, where we say that the 5 at-large members aren't serving on other boards, are we excluding people who have served on other boards in the past? Like, would John Goodwin be eligible to serve as an at-large member?
Well, you've got the language. I don't read it as
Okay,
previously served.
we just had a conversation about having new blood and fresh blood and people who've never served on anything. And so I thought that was a fair question, because
No,
John obviously served on planning and zoning since I've been around. And I've been here 10 years.
It's a good policy question, but I don't think the language would keep him off.
Okay. Would you want to have people who have served in that capacity for years and years? Or do we want truly fresh blood?
I think that's up to Kevin.
Christina, you're on mute.
If it's John Goodwin, I definitely would like to see him, if at all possible, to be part of the committee.
Okay.
But it's part of the interview. I think it's part of the interview, again, the
Mhm.
criteria you're looking for, the interview process. I don't think you should limit it one way or the other.
I think
Okay.
it also depends who's applying. If you have 25 people, what's the criteria? So I think it's an executive decision.
Okay.
I think all we were meaning to say in the language is these 4 specific people
Yeah.
plus 5 others. I don't think we
Yeah.
really meant anything more than that.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to,
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
You're pressure testing a little, yeah.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
because we were talking about 5 people and
Right.
the basis for it, and it sounded like we wanted people from every corner of New Canaan and new blood, and
But
I
it could
just
be a
thought that
mix,
was
I
fair.
guess, yeah.
okay.
All right,
I
so
personally
well,
would love John Goodwin on this committee. I think he'd be fantastic. But
my God, yeah,
Hello?
huge
Christina,
credibility.
you're not on mute, honey.
Hi, Horace.
Christina, you're not muted.
Well, I have nothing more, and this draft is already intact, so we don't need any resolutions with regard to Affordable Housing Committee. We can just move that through the process and tee it up so it can be taken up by the town council. And Hilary and I will get to work on refining some Utilities Commission language.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Tom and Hillary, for all your work on this. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
problem.
it's
If anybody
it's a
has any-
grind. It's a grind. Thank
Well,
you.
And honestly, if you have any, I don't know, Tom and I will work on it, but obviously,
I
any
have some.
suggestions, like send it along for utilities.
I have some.
Great. Yeah, bring it on, and I'll share with everybody what we got from Kathleen Corbett.
Perfect.
All
So-
right?
So
Thank
what
you for your
are,
time,
what are,
everyone.
sorry, I know we're gonna end. What are next steps? This is coming in front of town council in February then, or?
Assuming we get the notices posted in time, which I think we can. Steve, do you think so?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys are ready, it can be, the language can definitely be posted, so.
Yeah, we're done.
It's, yeah, so basically it's got to get in 2 publications, 2 weeks, so.
There's a lot to vote on in the next meeting. Wow.
What about
I wish
utilities?
the other 19,092 people could watch how the sausage is made, because this is good stuff. It really, you guys are doing a great job, so thank you.
Steve, maybe MTV wants this video.
So
Maybe
so
there's-
So
Go
the
ahead.
plan is to vote, the plan is just let's, level set things here. The plan is to vote on the affordable housing. And the other one, Tom, correct? On.
Yeah. On real
Eh, eh,
estate.
On real estate, yeah. We're not
Correct. I
ready.
mean, we're obviously the utility commission, we're still working on the language, but
Right.
at least we have those two things that we will vote on in February, right? Okay.
Right.
Because I just don't want to get into March and budget season where we haven't gotten past these, because I think, we're pretty much there.
No, and to your point, Mark, I mean, if the Affordable Housing Committee gets formed, a conversation through the BOF, they could actually add a little bit of a budget for that particular committee. I mean, it can be done by special appropriation, obviously, but it would be nice to earmark just some seed money to get started, to really give that committee a good launch, to say, hey, they're going to need help, and let's fund it immediately so they can get going.
Given that we have a draft on utilities, is there any way we can move that forward
No.
as well for February? No?
No, I'm sorry. We
Okay. Just
painful,
asking.
deliberate process, but we really need a new draft, and we need to go through it carefully.
Okay,
So take a little more time.
got it.
Well, thank you, Hillary and Tom, to
All
echo
right.
everyone else's comments.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye now.
Tom, if you can get me that language, we'll get it. We can help get it posted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tucker has it already. She's
Oh, does you good?
she knows that it's she was just temporarily on hold, but I'll resend it all.
Great.
All
Thank you,
right.
guys.
Thank
Have
you.
a good one. Take care. Stay warm.